available airport that can accommodate it, and since we fly polar routes out of Chicago to Europe and most other places, they would have, many of them, been in Canadian airspace, so I suspect they would have diverted to Toronto, Montreal, and places like that. So I imagine that, that the president, we aren't going to be told where he is. I mean, if they're going after the White House and Camp David. Camp David actually is a secure location. I suspect that if there is something to the Camp David crash, it was probably another attack. Air Force One. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So they're going to keep him away if they're targeting his fighter aircraft covering. It's also symbolic.
Everyone is looking for significance and dates too, and someone just told me that on this day in 1978, the Camp David Accord was signed. Is it something that, I mean, are people scrambling now to try and make some logic out of why? Well, sure. You can of course, everyone connect the dots very quickly because of course we know with the Oklahoma City bombing that it was the anniversary of the Waco attack. And as I said, remember, terrorists like the symbolic. So of course there is that possibility, but we don't want to over. It doesn't really matter at this point. It does not, absolutely. But the Illinois Trade Center, a lot of the buildings in the Loop are closing right now. I know the State of Illinois building and some other buildings. The Illinois National Guard has been called. They're not doing anything right now, but I'm sure that's standard operating procedure for something like this.
And we're not even really getting any sense of the panic that must be happening on the streets of New York. We're just beginning to get our first pictures from the ground because live shots that we would normally get, you normally see live cameras everywhere, would normally be with the help of the antennas on the World Trade Center tower. Let's listen into CNN.
Which is the fourth incident, if you will. There was the plane crash at the Pentagon, crashing into the Pentagon. There were the two planes that hit the World Trade Center here in New York, and we don't know whether this fourth one is related or not, but the report is that a 747 en route from Chicago to New York City crashed in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, about 80 miles to the southeast of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's the incident. That's what we are hearing.
Started crying and bawling. And I'm standing next to a fireman. He said, yeah, they just bombed the Pentagon, too.
Our colleague, Jeff Green, well, we have a little more sound here from witnesses.
I'm with the fire alarm company. The doorman goes to me, wow, I never seen a plane flying so low. And we looked out at it, all of a sudden, boom, it seemed like it wasn't even real. And we came running over here closer to the place, and all of a sudden we saw the other explosion. I don't know.
What's happening?
She's right in front of the explosion.
I was in B Tower. A Tower.
What floor were you on? The Department of Aviation is joining us now. Monique, we are hearing that this plane in Pennsylvania was from Chicago?
I don't have any information about that right now, Randy. So, again, what we're trying to focus on now is just trying to let passengers know that for the most part of today's operation, there will be no operations at Chicago's airport.
All right, Monique, we're emphasizing that you have no information as to whether this plane that crashed near Pittsburgh was from Chicago, though.
I have no information about that right now.
I can't tell you. On the wire, it says that the plane, let me see.
Monique's probably isn't going to know. But, all right, thank you, Monique, for that. Or if she does, she probably can't tell us right now. But we are hearing other reports.
Well, the plane was bound for Chicago, according to WPXI. The plane is supposedly originated in either Cleveland or New York and was bound for Chicago. This, again, according to WPXI, which is a TV station in Pittsburgh.
A 747 Jumbo. That crashed about 10 a.m. Eastern time.
It crashed in Somerset County. That's near Pittsburgh, about 80 miles southeast of the city. And this, of course, happening after departures had already stopped nationwide. Now, I guess this is certainly affecting air traffic worldwide.
Monique, what do you know about two other planes being over the United States right now that may have been hijacked? Monique?
Yeah, Monique is unavailable right now. Phone contact has gone down.
Okay, thank you. We are hearing reports that there is a possibility there are two other planes over the United States right now that have been hijacked. I don't know if this is coming out of the news conference that happened at O'Hare a short time ago. Bob Jordan, what can you tell us from the 911 center in Chicago? Well, the mayor... Let's update the Chicago angle on the plane right now that crashed in Pennsylvania. It was originated either Cleveland or New York. It was bound for Chicago. It's a Boeing 747, the largest passenger jet flown domestically. Also, let me get this real quick, Roseanne. The Federal Aviation has ordered all departing flights canceled nationwide. Any planes already in the air were to land at the nearest airports. That plane that crashed in Pennsylvania crashed shortly after that order was issued. So you can speculate a terrorist is on board, here's the order, and can't wait anymore for his intended target, and takes it down right there.
And our investigative unit information that there may be 2 hijacked flights currently in the air. We don't have any confirmation on that, but
I mean, it just keeps getting worse. No, we're still looking at that's the Pentagon in the videotape there. We have no, numbers on how many people are injured or have died and all this, but you can just imagine, Tom, we're talking, these are huge targets, huge planes. We're talking tens of thousands of victims.
I think you've got well over 1,000 or more just on the aircraft themselves. I mean, the towers themselves, it's hard to imagine anybody on the upper floors got out alive. You had the chaos on the ground. A certain number of people would have died of smoke inhalation around it. It's a staggering loss of life that we're talking about.
Tom Akaitis is a terrorist expert at Professor at DePaul University who will stay with us this morning and try and add some insight into all of this. In terms of the city of Chicago, there have been no problems here. We can't emphasize that enough. Other people are leaving buildings, though buildings have been evacuated precautionary. But now we've got this whole new angle of a plane that was bound for Chicago, the one that crashed in Pennsylvania.
That was the first time that kind of attack.
In terms of getting out of the city of Chicago, people trying to get home just because they want to get out of the city of Chicago and get home, the CTA, Robin says, is running train after train after train. None of the highways appear to be a problem right now, but most of our state buildings have been closed.
And in New York, pandemonium. Certainly not enough rescue people to help out. Hospitals that are packed. Very dire situation.
Mayor Giuliani quoted, "I have a sense it's a horrendous number of lives lost," which may be the understatement of the day here.
And we have a president right now.
We have not heard from President Bush since a couple hours ago. He left Florida in Air Force One, and we haven't heard any more information on this Camp David plane that we know that crashed. Whether this is commercial, and the way things are playing out, we can assume it probably is. We've got at least 5 commercial planes that have crashed at this point.
We're going to
Possibly
listen
as many
in.
as 7.
We're going to listen in once again to CNN.
Yeah.
For those of you just joining us, let me try and put as many of these pieces together as I can as we stand here in New York. At about 8:45 Eastern Daylight Time this morning, the first of the Trade Center towers was hit by a plane. It crashed into the south side of the tower. About a half an hour later, a second plane came from the right, and you can see it coming behind the first tower, and then it hits the tower, and you'll see the flame and smoke coming out, I guess 3/4, maybe a little more, up the tower. That's where this all began. About a half an hour after that, the first of that tower that is now, you see, in flame there in your shot, collapsed. The top collapsed. And there was an enormous, I don't want to say explosion, but there was an enormous plume of smoke, sparks, as we looked over from where we're standing. And then a little bit after that, and I want to be careful on time because it seemed perhaps 10 or so minutes, but I'm not sure. The second tower, which in fact was the first one hit, collapsed as well, and that's what you're about to see. Our reporters in the area say they heard loud noises when that happened. It is unclear to them and to us whether those were explosions going on in the building or if that was simply the sound of the collapse of the buildings as they collapsed, making these huge noises as they came down. But as we look back, the smoke now, which has gone from white to a kind of gray, clearing away, we are, I guess, Jeff, I want to know what's behind the smoke, but the worst feeling is that very little.
And the fact is that we've already been hearing from even the fragmentary reports from people on the ground, stories beyond horror, people jumping out of windows because of the flames. The fact that this happened shortly before 9 and then the second hit shortly after 9 means that most of the people were either right in the vicinity or actually at their desks. So one doesn't want to be overly grim, but the fact is there were thousands of people were in these two buildings.
Again, 50,000 people come to work in those buildings. Many thousands more pass through those buildings every day. There are retail shops on the lower floors of the Trade Center.
It is where the PATH trains from New Jersey come in.
Correct. The trains, the commuter trains coming from the other side of the river from New Jersey come in and drop off and pick up their passengers. So it is an extraordinarily busy area. It is also an area, for a number of reasons, rich in symbolism to this city and to the country. You can see from where we are, the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor in the scene. So that's what happened in New York.
All right.
We have someone on the phone now, Randy, from Rogers Park, Abram Fox, who has family in New York. Good morning.
Yes, hi.
Hi. Who have you talked to? Your family in New York?
Yes, I have. I have a 26-and-a-half-year-old son who works in the financial district in Manhattan. Called me, thank God he's safe, but he indicated to me that most of his clients, he works for a major international bank, are housed in the World Trade Center. He described the feeling in New York as a kind of a World War III. He went on to say, which is an extraordinary statement, that the safest thing that he could do for himself would be to get on a plane and go to Israel, which is quite interesting. And I have an 18-year-old son in Israel, in Jerusalem, Israel, as we speak, who is, thank God, safe. And I have a daughter who's a teacher in the Upper East Side of Manhattan. The school has effectively been turned into a prison. They won't let anyone out. And I have a son-in-law who's a last fourth-year medical student at NYU Medical School and Hospital Bellevue, which is where all of the injured people are being brought. So I have, interestingly enough, some family members who can react. My own reaction as a citizen of Chicago, as an American, is one of outrage, and as a Jew, is that for those that believe that terrorism occurs only in Israel, perhaps this is an indication as to how people who live in Israel wake up and deal with this kind of thing every single day and minute of the week. We as Americans can't really empathize with that kind of terrorism on a daily basis because we don't live there. But this is more extraordinary than anything any of us have ever imagined.
Certainly, Abram, thank you. We're glad that your family you've talked to them and are safe. Joe Burns is a structural engineer. Joe, can you hear me?
Yes.
Joe, did you watch the actual buildings collapse, Joe?
I wasn't near a video when it happened, but I recently saw a video here at your station.
Maybe it's an unfair question. Does that appear as something that would happen after this on its own because of the initial trauma to the building, or does it appear that another bomb may have gone off?
Well, it's hard to tell, but I saw a lot of fire, and I would say fire probably had something to do with it. While buildings are designed to resist a certain amount of fire, these look like horrific levels of fire and intense heat.
And something like that would just merely weaken a building even at its core, that tall of a building?
Fire does weaken structures, which is why they've been designed for fire, but usually fire on the level of the material that's actually in a building, not something would be flown in, such as a bomb or something.
And can you estimate how wide a range of the destruction, when the buildings did collapse, how many, square blocks where would the debris land?
I couldn't say. You're just showing the picture of it there on the film, and it's really hard to say. It's all smoke, of course, and I think once the smoke clears, we'll get a better sense of that. But it looks horrific. I couldn't have imagined anything more horrific than this.
I mean, we can only, get a point of reference from our own city here. And, obviously you look at a building like the Sears Tower, and if that collapses even upon itself, you've got to think that, God, half the loop is going to be impacted.
Absolutely. And I would say that this kind of an event, a terrorist event, is something that's, of course, very hard to plan for. Unlike wind and earthquakes and other natural disasters that we design tall buildings for, it's not clear at this point. It's very hard to speculate what kind of level of other impact in addition to the airplane, which is a very large airplane.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe.
Okay.
We have new information out of New York that a bomb has now been found in New York City High School, and that has been evacuated.
High school being evacuated. We do know that the National Guard is on a heightened alert here in Illinois, but at this point, no one's saying exactly what they're doing. Let's check in, Robin. I know that a lot of people trying to get home to family here in Chicago, even what's going on the road.
Absolutely. You know, we just spoke with Metra and CTA. Metra telling us they're pretty much running trains continuously, loading and going, refueling to accommodate the number of people that want to get out of downtown. CTA says they normally diminish the number of trains and buses they run in the middle of the day between the two rush hours. They say they have just kept their volume up to a rush hour level, so they're not adding trains. They are just keeping it at a high volume as they would during an afternoon rush hour. As for traffic getting out of the city right now, I'm looking at the volume. It is very heavy on the outbound Kennedy, the outbound Eisenhower, Stevenson not so bad, and the Dan Ryan not so bad, but we're hearing reports of people coming in who have just gotten to work at our place here off of the Kennedy, saying it is really starting to thicken up on the Ryan and the Kennedy headed out of downtown with people trying to get out of the city.
Let's report also American Airlines saying now that it's confirming lost 2 aircraft carrying 156 people. Our investigative unit also is telling us that there is speculation there are 2 planes still in the air over the United States that have hijackers on board. Still working to confirm what exactly is going on in that situation. We do know the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania was bound for Chicago.
Right.
A large plane, a 747.
And we hadn't yet identified the plane that hit the Pentagon in Camp David, so I'm wondering maybe these are the 2 that were missing.
Yeah.
Because those had not been identified yet. In total, 5 plane crashes now, and we have given you the flight numbers for 2 of them and identified the route of the one that hit Pittsburgh. The ones we've identified, obviously, the ones that hit the World Trade Center.
We're getting some information right now from, yeah, that's what we just said. American Airlines confirming that at 2 of its planes, 156 people. Now, we're hearing different numbers on the World Trade Center. I know it's hard to grasp. 50,000 people working there. Some had said 10, but most of the numbers I'm seeing is 50,000 people.
Yes, and in each tower.
Yes.
That's what my record says.
They were trying to evacuate at the time of that crash. Things start early there because it's a financial area, so, these buildings, may be at capacity at 8 o'clock in the morning when something like this happens.
And it could take hours to evacuate all of the people
the FAA is shutting down
into those city streets.
Right. FAA shut down all air traffic right now in the United States. Nobody can remember when this has ever happened before.
Yeah, planes told to just land at the nearest airport to get all.
And that apparently was what was being told to the pilot, or at least the plane, that crashed in Pittsburgh. It was just minutes or seconds after that FAA edict went down to bring all the planes in that plane crashed. So that is no coincidence, obviously.
The plane, yes. We have a terrorism expert. We want to remind you that Tom is with us. And,
it's given that was a Chicago-bound aircraft, it's not improbable that a target could have been here, and that the terrorists, if that is in fact what brought the plane down, which seems quite likely, decided that they would, rather than let it land at all, they would simply destroy it as even a small gesture. As ironic as that sounds, but it could very easily have had a Chicago target.
Yeah. And we're still looking at them battling that fire at the Pentagon, and we don't have any more information on the
bombing at the State Department.
Right.
There was a car bomb,
right.
we should say. Also, early reports.
That's an important point. You think about counter-terrorist measures.
Go ahead.
That in fact, after the World Trade Center bombing a number of years ago, we've been primed for a ground-level, car-bomb kind of an attack, and less prepared for something as horrific as an airliner being run into a building. And I think that's one of the things that has so totally caught people. So I'd be surprised if the State Department bombing from the ground actually did much damage. They probably hardened that site long ago.
All right, the State Department is now saying there has not been a bombing there, so we'll clear all that up. Obviously some errors are going to be made in a situation like this. But let's listen into CNN. Let's get up to date on what they're hearing in Washington and New York.
My colleague Aaron Brown, and for any one of the other many correspondents, producers, and others with CNN and our colleagues at the other news networks. And I would just remind you that CNN right now has producers, correspondents, all around the world who are watching for any more information that we can bring you at this point. As Aaron and Jeff Greenfield have been saying in the last few minutes, everything we have right now is fragmentary. We are simply reporting to you what we are learning from police, from the federal government, from the CIA, from David Ensor, from our other correspondents. And I'm now told that
Former U.S. Army Commander General Wesley Clark is joining us on the telephone. Former commander of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is joining us from Little Rock, Arkansas. General Clark, from your knowledge of the military, you know the Pentagon. What are you thinking right now?
Well, good morning, Judy. First of all, we've got to try to assess what's really happening, and as all of the news reports indicate, it's clearly a coordinated effort. It wasn't announced, and it hasn't been announced that it's over, and we don't know how it will finally conclude, so there's likely to be more trouble before all of this concludes. So we've got to protect the American people first. We've got to look after those who are injured. We've got to take precautionary measures to deal with future incidents, and I think all of that's underway with a lot of responsible action by people everywhere. The damage at the Pentagon is unclear from all the news reports that I've seen. The one report that said it crashed into the Army side of the building. There are command centers in various places of the Pentagon, and there are many other alternate command centers. So I don't think there's really any issue about the command and control of the United States Armed Forces. I'm sure that's very solid right now.
General Clark, why do you say there's likely to be more trouble?
Well, we're hearing still reports of aircraft that are out there. There's no way of knowing when all of the possible incidents have either taken place or been aborted by whoever it is that's behind this. And so we have to be ready for whatever might happen next.
General, can you give us some sense of, clearly the United States has never experienced anything of this magnitude, but what are the leaders of our military, the Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of Defense and others, what presumably are they doing right now in order to be on top of a situation where you have the Pentagon on fire, New York City in a state of chaos, and every federal building in Washington evacuated?
Well, first of all, we'll be trying to assess what happened. We'll be making sure that the protection posture of our bases worldwide and all of our units out there is raised so that we're able to protect our forces and our family members, and then we'll be looking to provide assistance to wherever such incidents might occur. Whatever military capabilities there will be that could be of use will be certainly made available to the other agencies of state, local, and federal government who are involved in trying to deal with these tragedies right now. Then beyond that, we'll be waiting for the information to come in about who may have been behind this, and we'll be looking at what measures can be taken to strike and prevent further actions or in punitive retaliation.
Well, speaking of that, General Clark, wouldn't you agree there are very few of the terrorist groups, at least that we're familiar with, who would have the capability to pull off something this coordinated on this scale?
I think that's exactly right. There's only one group that has ever indicated that it has this kind of ability, and that's Osama bin Laden's. So obviously that'll be the first suspicion.
Are you, clearly we are all in a state of shock, General Clark, but is it fair to say that you're not truly surprised by this, given what we've heard from that particular group? And again, we don't know who's behind this, but given what we do know.
Well, there have been many threats made against the United States and threats of terrorism, and we know that the World Trade Center has been a target. We know that aircraft have been hijacked, and we know that car bombings are used in many places in the world, and there's no doubt that for a long time there have been groups who have tried to target the United States. Normally, many times we've gotten indications. We've been able to take actions that the American public never knows about that have broken up these attempts. In this case, for whatever reason, we didn't have the information and we weren't able to take the actions to break it up.
And General, what do you say to those Americans who are looking at these horrific pictures that they've been watching now for almost 3 hours on television, who are thinking, will I ever feel safe again in an airplane, in a tall building in this country?
I think that will be one of the primary issues that has to be addressed by government leaders is how to restore ever a sense of normalcy to the country. Will it ever be the same? And that's a question everybody will be asking. But I think it's too soon to expect any answers to that. I think we've got to assess this. We've got to track this down. I think one thing that comes through very clearly now is if this is terrorism and international terrorism, then clearly there has to be a much greater degree of cooperation between nations to deal with this. Whoever did this lives somewhere. He's supported by someone, and people know him. And someone knew that these events were being planned. And if we didn't have that information, we should have. And I think that's one resolve that will come out of this from nations all over the world, that more has to be done collectively together.
But in a large sense, General Clark, whoever was behind this has clearly succeeded in the most horrific and devastating way.
Well, it's been a tragedy for America. There's no doubt about that, and for so many people and their families, our hearts go out to them.
General, we're looking, as I'm talking with General Wesley Clark, who is a former NATO commander. He's talking to us from Arkansas. We're looking at helicopters patrolling. I believe it's the area around the Pentagon, although I can't tell by the banner across the lower part of the screen. We do know that President Bush was in Florida this morning. He abruptly cut his trip short in order, we think, to fly back to Washington. And General Clark, while you are with us, what would the plans be for the president in this situation without giving away secure information? Would the president necessarily return to Washington? Is there always a plan in place in these situations?
Well, there would have to be a plan always in place to take the president to where he can best control what's going on and monitor it and make decisions, and also where he will be safe. And you can be sure that there are plans and backup plans and alternate plans to the backup plans. There'll be no shortage of efforts underway to assure his safety and his ability to...
All right, we're monitoring things here, obviously, and we do have confirmation now, which changes what we were telling you about the plane that was bound for Chicago. We don't know if it was supposed to stop in Chicago, but this was not the final destination. United Airlines confirming it was the flight from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco that crashed near Pittsburgh, and that is the latest on that. We're waiting for Mayor Daley right now. The city officials are meeting at 911 Center to determine what we're going to do here.
We have a terrorism expert with us, Tom Akaitis from DePaul University, and we've been hearing reports that this had all the markings of an attack sponsored by Osama bin Laden. Can you tell us?
Yes. You remember the attacks in 1998 in Tanzania and Kenya.
The U.S. embassies.
Yes, two near simultaneous attacks on U.S. targets overseas, requiring this kind of coordination, sophistication, and a lot of money. We know about the similar attack on the USS Cole at Aden a year or so ago, which was a suicide attack. All of these things have a striking similarity to what's going on, and I want to stress something the General said. There are very, very few organizations, arguably only one, with the worldwide reach and the resources to be able to pull something as sophisticated as this off.
And what is their point? What do they want?
The point is, this is one of the most frustrating things about the nature of terrorism today. A traditional terrorist organization is usually linked to a political agenda, whether it's Hamas, whether it's the Irish Republican Army, whether it's the Kali drug cartel. They want something very specific. You may not give it to them, but at least you understand it. What do you do with a generalized hatred of the United States as the great Satan?
And what will they do? What on earth? What kind of response can we expect from the United States?
I would hope that it's restrained. I fear that the retribution on this is going to be truly terrible. We have, by and large, taken a fairly restrained response to terrorist incidents. You recall that after the two bombings where there were cruise missile attacks on Afghanistan and Sudan, which, although they killed people, were in fact largely symbolic. I would expect a much more extensive military response.
And does that up the ante? Does that encourage more terrorism?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the increasing spiral of violence is always to be concerned. By the same tokens, a sovereign state cannot simply stand still and take this kind of a hit to its innocent civilians.
Well, I mean, this is this is an act of war practically. This is the worst, we've seen it since Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if we just simply take the number of people purported to be in the Trade Center, assume the death tolls would be quite high, we're looking at a potential casualty list as large as the Vietnam War for the United States.
And if you're flipping around, as I'm sure a lot of people are, let me update you again on the plane that crashed near Pittsburgh. Originally, we were told it was bound for Chicago. It apparently was bound for San Francisco. It may have had a layover in Chicago. We don't know that, but United is confirming one of their planes that crashed near Pittsburgh was bound for San Francisco. We are at least 5 plane crashes right now.
And that's including 2 at the World Trade Center, 1 at the Pentagon, 1 at Camp David, and then 1 out of Pittsburgh.
The one in Pittsburgh crashed just north of Somerset County Airport. Is it making a landing? I don't know. The way things are going today, it would have all the makings of another hijacker on board. We haven't heard any more information about the possibility that there are 2 more planes out there with hijackers on them. It's been almost an hour and a half now since all planes were stopped. We were talking to Larry Potash, who is on his way back from Europe. His plane was turned around, we heard?
That's right. He was actually on vacation and was heading back. He had boarded a flight in London and was able to call the desk momentarily just to say that his flight was turned around over the ocean and sent back, and that he would call
All right, CNN is reporting a Flight 175, United Airlines, Flight 175 from Boston to L.A. is missing right now. Missing right now. They are deeply concerned, obviously. It's another flight from Boston to L.A., Flight 175 United. It's missing right now. Now, in the control room, do we know, are they speculating it's one of these planes that's already crashed, or this is simply, they would know that, obviously, so it's missing, it could be hijacked. They cannot account for it right now.
Right. We should say, though, that we haven't identified the plane that hit the Pentagon or the plane that hit Camp David. So hopefully...
Well, we have. I think
there's no good scenario.
We did identify those. The one was from Boston, they know?
No, those were the 2 World Trade Centers.
Oh, I'm sorry. The one at Camp David. Yeah, we still have not gotten any more information on Camp David. And Tom, I guess... this is going to take a long time for us to just absorb what's happening today. How do we go about our lives? How do we get on a plane at this point?
Well, after any terrorist incident, the thing I stress more than anything else is that you have to live your life and get back to normal as much as possible. The terrorists would love nothing more than for all of us to take ourselves prisoner and restrict our activities.
And I think the point one caller was trying to make is, if you live in Israel, no matter what side you're on of the situation in the Middle East, these are things that you see or deal with, on a regular basis, or at least it's in the back of your mind.
Yes.
And, is that what we're destined for here?
I don't think so. I think we're destined for an increased level of security at various places and higher levels of inconvenience and so on. But I suspect we will never forget this. I think we'll never be quite the same. But I think we will continue, in Chicago at least, to be more worried about the Dan Ryan, Edens, and the Eisenhowers potential dangers than this.
Let's hope so, because
the
sight of military jets patrolling the skies over New York City this morning is more than a little frightening. If this flight, God forbid, this flight is not one of the ones that crashed and is under the control of hostage takers, or any flight, if any flight is right now, what would likely be the strategy to do?
Well, again, at this point, with military aircraft scrambled, I suspect not just over New York, but over vast areas of the United States, I think they would I would expect them to look for the most immediate and dramatic target of opportunity. They may very well have had an assigned target to strike, but the odds are great that they will, in fact, go for whatever they can. I suspect something like that happened aboard the flight to Pittsburgh. My wife's family is from that area. It's largely hills and suburbs and so on around there. There's nothing that would have explained why it would crash where it did.
CNN's reporting, Tom, that the Islamic Jihad is taking responsibility for the attacks in response. I'm sorry, in response to?
Yeah.
U.S., just basically a generic U.S. policy in the Middle East.
I wouldn't give a whole lot of credit to that. They have did not, to the best of my knowledge, and I could be wrong, have this kind of worldwide reach. I think all kinds of terrorist organizations are standing up and cheering at this moment. There was a very extreme splinter Palestinian group that was credited. That was later denied. I go with those experts who have said that, in fact, something like this almost requires the backing of a state, and jihad doesn't have that to the same kind of degree. Most of its targets have been in the Middle East.
Confirming again, United also says it is, quote, deeply concerned about a further flight. It's United Airlines 175. That's the flight number. It's a Boeing 767 from Boston to Los Angeles. That's what we were telling you a short time ago. To add even more terror to this already horrendous day, there is apparently a plane either still in the air, possibly with a hijacker on board.
We're still waiting to hear from the mayor, but as we told you, the Sears Tower and the Amoco building, most of the high-rises in Chicago evacuated, if not, required. They were voluntarily evacuated. Also, senior staff at Cook County Hospital, we're told, are discussing how they would deal with such an attack. So everybody in a really heightened state of alert across the country at this moment, because you just don't know.
And obviously, Tom, this is what terrorists want, but geez, at this point, what else can you do?
Well, the irony of this is that we really are being thrown back to the situation of the Cold War. I mean, during the era of the threat of nuclear holocaust, all cities and all hospitals basically had to have civil defense emergency plans for something of a massive scale. And again, in the
I'm just looking at videotape again. It's stunning when you see the sections of the World Trade Center actually crashing to the ground. Why don't we switch to that shot? There you go. This is, again, videotape, but, I mean, it's just horrendous every time you see it. I'm sorry, Tom, go ahead.
No, that's okay. In fact, and I think in the post-Cold War world, in a sense of perhaps false security, we've, in fact, forgotten, the kind of heightened anxiety that we lived under, and I suspect these plans got rusty, and of course now...
Go ahead. I'm sorry. We're hearing about cancellations too. Everything from baseball games in New York.
Right.
You've got to imagine most things are going to be canceled throughout the United States today.
Yeah.
As everyone leaves work and tries to get out. Let's go to CNN for a briefing.
45-0999. Secondly, family members can call a Mathport number 617-568-3100. We've also urging people not to come to the airport at this point in time. We've increased the shuttle buses from the terminals to the MBTA Blue Line stop, and the MBTA has increased the frequency of subway transportation. We are in close communication with the FAA, the FBI, State Police, Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And that's all I have right now.
No, you've got to tell them.
What flights do you have reports on?
The flights, I cannot confirm or deny any flight numbers because I have not received official notification on any flight numbers.
I'll call in. It'll be everybody who's got a flight.
Okay, I do believe several of the media outlets are broadcasting several flight numbers. I believe they broadcast flight number 11, American Airlines. I don't know at this point in time.
Were the passengers hijacked?
I cannot confirm that.
Has the airport accounted all outbound flights?
That's outside of the scope of the airport's responsibility. We're leaving it up to the FAA to conduct that activity.
Joe, what is the code Fort Knox? We have reports of employees screaming Fort Knox around the time that the planes went into the world.
I don't know what that means. Doesn't mean have any connotation here at Logan Airport.
What about planes that are flying in here? Are they being rerouted somewhere else?
Aircraft were flying into Logan Airport. We did take some arrivals, but now since the airport is shut down, these flights will be diverted to Canada.
They're not taking flights either.
Are you screening them?
We're moving from another area, yes. They're being directed to seek either public transportation or their own transportation out of the airport. Leaving the airport? No.
How long do you anticipate the airport to be closed?
It's indefinite at this time. We'll be meeting with the FAA. We'll be conducting analysis of our intelligence that we have. We'll make a determination later on this afternoon.
What detail?
Pardon me? I can just tell you briefly, we have shut down security checkpoints. We've moved everyone away from the boarding gate areas. We've increased police presence dramatically. We've requested additional state police be sent to the airport. And we've shut down some construction activities around the airport.
Is this the highest level of security ever, Joe?
Is another flight from Boston?
I can't confirm or deny that right now.
Was there anything unusual about the boarding procedure of this flight?
I don't have any reports that would say the same.
Are you investigating breaches of security? How are you getting to the bottom of this hijacking?
I can tell you we have an ongoing investigation right now. Just an initial investigation being conducted with Massport, Massachusetts State Police, and the FBI.
What do you know about United Airlines Flight 175, which is unaccounted for right now?
I don't have any, can't confirm or anything or deny anything on that.
Did you have
the flight.
got a number?
No, they have not.
Joe, did Flight 11 leave on time? Were there any delays? And was there any conversation between the pilot and the tower that seemed unusual?
Flight number 11 left at 7:59. I believe it was on time. Everything went as scheduled when it left Logan Airport.
How many people were on board?
I don't have a passenger count right now.
Are you aware of any communications from the pilot?
No, I'm not.
What is flight path to LA normally is taking it south towards New York?
I can't answer that. I don't have any information on that flight path.
When did the radar, when did the tower here detect that there was something wrong?
Again, I don't have that specific information.
Let's update you on several fronts from here in Chicago. Once again, that United Flight 175 Boston to LA, it's a Boeing 767, is somewhere, we presume, over the United States now. And while we're not getting a lot of information from the authorities, it would appear, they say they've lost contact with it, but it would appear this has also been hijacked at this point. As far as Camp David goes, no confirmation on a plane crashing there. That may have been an erroneous report. Let's check in with Robin in terms of people getting out of Chicago. We know that no flights are getting out of O'Hare, Robin, and apparently you can't even get to O'Hare right now by train.
Right now, CTA is, the Blue Line service is only going as far as the Rosemont stop, so they're not bringing trains all the way into O'Hare. We're assuming, we have not heard from them, that trains are bringing people out of O'Hare, but they say you can no longer take the Blue Line all the way to the O'Hare stop. They are stopping them at Rosemont. As for the rest of the trains on the CTA, they're just running at a rush hour schedule, bringing the extra volumes of people out of the city. Metra is simply running continuous trains out of downtown now, no schedule, so if you go to a downtown stop, a train will be there soon. They're just continuously running them and refueling them. And as far as volume on the expressways, it is very heavy on the outbound Kennedy, outbound Eisenhower, but nothing that you wouldn't normally see at this time of day.
Okay, no panic here, obviously, and nothing has happened in Chicago. There is no reason to panic at this point. Back over to the, I'm reading the latest on these flights in case you have people who are flying and you want some flight numbers, although I was told United has taken its webpage off right now, so you can't do what you can do where you go on there and try and find flights. Their webpage is off. It's just a message from the president. We've got an American Airlines saying they lost 2. It was Flight 11 with 92 people on board. Flight 77 with 64 people on board. Those are the 2 we think that went into the World Trade Center. One from Washington to Los Angeles, another from Boston. The Pennsylvania flight that crashed, Flight 93, it's a Boeing 757. It was from Newark, New Jersey, bound for San Francisco. Crashed about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. Initially, we were told that was coming to Chicago. That does not appear to be the case now. It was bound for San Francisco. We don't know how many people were on board that one. And then there's the plane that is missing it, Flight 175, a Boeing 767 bound from Boston to Los Angeles. They must know where it is. Tom, we were talking before.
Yeah.
People, they know where this plane is.
I mean, the United States, the Continental Air Defense Command has the capacity to track a full-scale bomber invasion. I don't know that all that's up and running or what the details are on that. I suspect the military is probably tracking that aircraft, and that the civilian flight controllers do not know specifically where it is. I doubt that for reasons of not spreading panic, no one is going to particularly say.
We do know that plenty of things are closing in Chicago, though. I know that Northwestern, the academic buildings are closed. The hospital is open right now, but the hospital once again is open. You need to call ahead if you're going anywhere in Chicago right now.
Right, our Loop campus is closed.
Yeah, there is a chance most things. And this is still videotape from earlier today when the World Trade Center building collapsed after the plane had hit it maybe a half an hour before that.
2 plane crashes followed by 2 building collapses.
And it's interesting to see, we're seeing on the wires there is a good deal of celebration in
the Middle East.
In the Middle East, but that could be they don't like the United States as it is. It doesn't necessarily tell us
I'd be very surprised if there were a Palestinian connection. There is generalized anger at the United States because of our support for the State of Israel. in the Palestinian community. What they are doing is incredibly foolish in terms of the United States' sympathy for the Palestinian cause, of which there was, I think, a considerable amount. Seeing people dance in the streets over a tragedy of this magnitude is not going to do the cause any good at all.
Regardless of if the Palestinians were responsible for it or not.
Absolutely. Standing up and cheering is not...
Is this the sort of thing, even though we've never seen anything like it, is it the sort of thing where people will come forward and take credit for this? Is that what they want?
Well, it's, yeah, I mean, I think, ironically, at this point, I think that everybody who didn't do it might be anxious to jump on the bandwagon and claim some responsibility, and the one who actually did, it will be clear, they won't necessarily come forward and say anything.
Yasser Arafat apparently denouncing it, though.
I would expect that, yeah.
And we talked earlier, but not in a while, about what possible retaliation they might expect from the United States and how they go about this.
Well, as I said, I expect the retaliation to be, much more substantial than anything we've seen so far, given the magnitude of the attack. I think it will be depending on the degree to which the perpetrators can be, in fact, identified. Although we know in the case of the attack on the Sudan, we didn't even wait in that case for a fairly clear indication of connection. We really lashed out quite strongly at targets. Those were really largely symbolic attacks. I don't minimize the loss of life they called, but compared to the capacity to strike, we did not do very much. I suspect we will do a lot this time.
Let me read this, and I know everyone has, or knows someone in New York, has friends, so everyone is concerned right now, and we'll just pass things along as we go. The White Sox have issued a statement. The White Sox are in New York for a Yankee series, and if any family or friends of White Sox players are watching, they have contacted them. They are okay. If I'm reading, let me read this real quick. The game has been canceled. I shouldn't say that they've contacted them. It doesn't say that there. But we presume they are trying to contact them. They know where they are. In terms of more closings, Roseanne, we've got a huge list here. I guess I should just start and we'll pass it along. O'Hare, no departures. Midway, no departures. Sears Tower evacuated. The Mercantile Exchange closed at 9:15.
The Merchandise Mart, the John Hancock Building, the Daly Center, the Dirksen Federal Building, the Field Museum. All court buildings are closed right now, and the Wrigley Building.
The Art Institute, and as far as the CTA, Robin's been updating us on that. We'll get back to her in a second on that. Terror Museum is closed. Aquarium's closed. I've got to think that most things are going to be closed by the end of the day. The State Building.
I think it's unlikely that anybody who's been following today's events would even venture out of
public
the house.
Places, Nordstrom's on Michigan Avenue, Navy Pier, stores are closing. I think churches are the one thing that we need to leave open right now.
We're speechless. In New York, we're told from eyewitnesses that the scene on the streets is, well, it's devastation. Of course, the building collapses and the victims, but also just people driving down the street in tears. And if we can take this other shot, I don't think we've even really gotten a good look at. Is that possible? We have another shot up here at ground level of people running as that Second World Trade Center tower collapsed.
The purely terrifying thing it was that they were just probably in the midst of triage and getting people out of there when not only the second plane hit, but then the buildings collapsed. I mean, if there were 50,000 people there when it first happened, there were probably 60,000 when, in terms of rescue personnel and other people.
Yeah. Right, and they only had about an hour between the time that the first airplane struck and the second building collapsed. Maybe an hour for evacuations to even be underway, and then after that, it was too late.
Senator Chuck Nagel, Nebraska, saying, quote, "This is the second Pearl Harbor. I don't think I can overstate it. Certainly not."
No.
Trying to update any United.
And the hospitals closed in New York.
They still have not officially gotten found out where that flight is. It's UA 175 bound from Boston to LA, but we've got to think that behind the scenes they know full well where that flight is.
I would suspect that's
you just don't fly a plane across the United States without some radar picking it up and them finding it. But whether they're negotiating with someone on board or doing what they can to try and stop even further tragedy, that we can presume that as well. Robin, you want to update us real quick? I know seeing as all these things are closed downtown, let's just hope everyone takes their time getting out of the city if that's indeed their plan, and how are things going
Absolutely.
right now?
We told you about CTA Blue Line trains not running all the way to the airport. You can get as far as Rosemont, which is roughly around the Mannheim stop there, and then they're turning around. We have not heard confirmation from CTA as to whether or not they are letting trains back out of the airport. We're assuming no, because the bulk of them are going to be turning around at Rosemont now. So you have to go to that Mannheim stop. The rest of of the CTA trains are just running at a rush hour volume right now, so higher volume than they normally would be at this time of day. So there are extra trains. Metra is simply loading people up and going. No schedule on Metra right now. They're refueling and just running continuous trains out of downtown. As for traffic out of the city right now, it's not as heavy of volume as you would think. The outbound Kennedy, just heavy through downtown. Same scoop on the Dan Ryan. And the Eisenhower, we're just seeing delays we normally would at this time of day. So, and Lakeshore Drive is looking fine too. Obviously, if you go down into the city, you're going to see maybe a little bit more activity, but that's about it.
I don't know how much more drama we can take, but walk us through, Tom, if this speculation turns out true that there is at least one plane with a hijacker on board somewhere over the United States right now, I mean, what possibly can our terrorist negotiators do at this point? We know these people don't care if they live.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to speculate on. I mean, the traditional wisdom doesn't seem to apply here, which is that the longer the hostages and the terrorists are together in the situation, the more they begin to bond, and perhaps it becomes possible to kind of climb down off the step ladder that they've got themselves on. If they are clearly on a mission of destruction where they're determined to crash this aircraft, I suspect they would look for the nearest, most dramatic target of opportunity, and I suspect the military is tracking them to see if that eventuality plays out. There's no point in making any moves or efforts at them as long as they don't appear to be taking that kind of drastic action.
We got some interesting information from a flight attendant at United. The flight attendant asked not to be identified, but gave us some behind-the-scenes tidbits on how they react in a situation like this, how they're trained to. This flight crew is trained to be compliant, to stay low-key if threatened.
Right. Absolutely right. I mean, this normal scenario for a hijacking is not that the terrorists are going to try to kill you, because, of course, the hostage become their leverage, become their bargaining chip. And so what the last thing you try to do in a situation is to provoke them into doing something dramatic that would either kill people or crash the aircraft. So, you know, the non-resistant, I've heard already that there's speculation that we may actually see armed marshals on aircraft now, such as the state of Israel has with El Al and always has had.
Let me clarify something I said before I was reading that White Sox statement. They have spoken with members of the White Sox traveling party in New York. They were playing the Yankees, or were supposed to. Everyone is okay. So if you have family or friends in the White Sox organization in New York, they are okay. Let's talk to Micah real quick. Micah, you've been monitoring things in back there. I know what sort of ramifications are coming from all this?
Well, we're checking basically into the Jewish community, as you know, that they could, they're at a heightened sense of awareness right now, especially what's been going on in Israel, and they feel that there could be some retaliation here. We understand that a large group of Chicago police officers have been moved into West Rogers Park, or in the Rogers Park neighborhood. Just to let you know that West Rogers Park area, very Orthodox, ultra-religious sects are in this area. As you might remember, Benjamin Smith went on a shooting rampage a couple of years ago in July. We have word from Temple Sholem, which is at 3470 Lakeshore Drive, not in West Rogers Park, but Jewish nonetheless. They've received a very threatening phone call, a message of hate coming in this morning into the building. Police immediately, of course, dispatched to that area. A sweep went through the building, and they found nothing, but everyone was taken out of that building, and it was shut down. Now, Steve Nasser is the head of the Jewish Federation. Smith went on a shooting rampage a couple of years ago in July. We have word from Temple Sholem, which is at 3470 Lakeshore Drive, not in West Rogers Park, but Jewish nonetheless. They've received a very threatening phone call, a message of hate coming in this morning into the building. Police immediately, of course, dispatched to that area. A sweep went through the building, and they found nothing, but everyone was taken out of that building, and it was shut down. Now, Steve Nasser is the head of the Jewish Federation, and he had this statement following a phone call this morning that he's given. And I'm going to read the statement quickly from Steve Nasser. As Americans, this is a time of profound sadness, and our hearts and thoughts are with what we will find to be significant fatalities. Time for Americans to come together, as we always have, in the face of those forces that are against democracies and freedom. And we need to stand and have full confidence that our government will take the necessary steps to ensure the protection of all citizens. At this time, we hope that God will continue to bless America. That, of course, again, is from Steve Nasser, head of the Jewish Federation. I should also mention again, the largest population of Jewish people are in the United States other than Israel. With what happened today and the recent attacks in Israel, Jewish people are very concerned about any type of retaliation. I've also talked with several rabbis this morning, some of the schools, including Solomon Schechter, that is in Skokie. They tell me they have been put on alert. They have heightened security. There's a Skokie police officers who are in and out there, a Cook County Sheriff's deputy. They've postponed an open house from this afternoon. Many parents have taken their children home. We have talked with Temple Solel and Highland Park. They didn't comment because of the tense situation when we talked to them. You could tell things were very tense out there this morning. Ida Crown, which is an Orthodox school on Pratt Avenue, is also closed for the day. That's just some of the Jewish schools that are reacting to what is happening across the country today. And again, just to reiterate, a message of hate did go into Temple Sholem this morning, and everyone pretty much heightened sense of awareness right now.
All right,
as
thank
they
you,
are
Micah.
across the country.
Obviously, copycats and people taking advantage of all this. Let's start from the beginning. Let's try and recap what's been going on for the past about 2.5 hours. It all started, about 7:30 Chicago time, almost 8 o'clock. First, the World Trade Center was hit. This is the second plane to hit the World Trade Center building.
The first report, we weren't even sure what happened, that it might have been an accident of some sort. This confirmed, I think, in everyone's minds that this was a terrorist attack, the second plane hitting.
Another angle on it here. There you see the plane briefly on your screen, and it crashes. This is what started it all, those two plane crashes. Probably a half an hour or so after that, word of a plane crashing at the Pentagon, another commercial airliner crashing at the Pentagon. And this is, at this point in the day, when we get word that these are hijacked planes, one from Boston, one from Newark. The World Trade Center then, shortly after that, collapses on itself.
One was actually, I think, from D.C. heading to the west, and then later the Pittsburgh flight, I think, was from Newark.
That's the World Trade Center, the first tower collapsing on itself. And you've got to realize that when this is happening, people are still inside. Rescue workers, there you see people. Well, it's another shot.
That's the second one going down.
And some other videotape. Then the second one goes down.
Yeah, that's the second one going down. In the meantime, of course, we had the report of a plane hitting the Pentagon and another one going down outside Pittsburgh. We've not yet seen pictures of the one out of Pittsburgh. But that was identified as a flight going from Newark to San Francisco. And horrifying.
Can we take that other feed? These are the first pictures in. This is what's going on in the World Trade Center while rescue is going on outside. People actually hanging out of the windows. Near the top of the building, it's a 110-story building. So these people are upwards of probably 105 or so stories up. It was impossible to get all of these people out of the World Trade Center even after the second plane crashed. Fire crews were walking up the stairs trying to get there. And while that happened, back to the live videotape. While that happened, both buildings collapsing within themselves within about a half hour of each other. And then, of course, there's word of the missing plane.
Just a ghastly sight.
A flight from Boston to L.A. It's flight 767. United flight 175. It's a Boeing 767. Is termed missing. But speculation is it's been hijacked. It's somewhere over the United States, and possibly behind the scenes they know where it is and are hopefully doing some kind of negotiations to avoid yet another plane crashing.
Right. And earlier we talked about some of the ramifications Micah was talking about in the Jewish community concerns. And we have our terrorism expert here, Tom, and you wanted to address the general anger that might be out there right now.
Right. There's going to be a lot of understandable, justified rage. I would just urge people to realize that there is a very large Islamic community in the Chicago area who are not implicated in this, who are loyal American citizens, and that we'd be very careful not to take that anger out on the innocent, which is unfortunately a natural reaction in everyone. And we are absolutely right to be concerned about the Middle East connection and the groups, but most Muslims do not support someone like Osama bin Laden.
Obviously, United is confirming now that the one plane that went down near Pittsburgh was theirs, and there's a second United plane that crashed, but the airline did not say where. We don't know which one of those.
And then we wanted to update you on some closures. Of course, we went through the list of buildings, most of the major buildings in Chicago closing down. Baseball also on hold. Baseball games canceled, we're being told.
The White Sox are in New York, actually set to play the Yankees. The game's been canceled. The White Sox here in Chicago, personnel say they have contacted the traveling party. Everyone's okay from the White Sox standpoint.
And of course, airports, forget it.
In terms of Chicago closings, yes, all airports, most big buildings, Sears, the Mercantile Exchange closed, Merchandise Mart. It's easier actually to say what's not closed. So if you're going anywhere, phone ahead. And I think in terms of traffic, Robin was telling us that the highways are actually okay where they normally are at this time, and the CTA is not running all the way out to O'Hare.
But Tom brought up a good point, and people should, try not to head downtown because it could, quickly get a little chaotic down there. So you should avoid our downtown area.
I would fully expect that